Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 141. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the multi-talented and acclaimed author, Alethea Kehas. Alethea,
Thank you.
How are you
Thank
doing?
you.
I said your last name right, too?
You kind of slur it all together, Kehas.
Oh, Kehas.
It's a tough one.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. Before we went live, I was really trying to get your first name down. And even so
yeah, it's a tough one. No worries.
That's right.
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're both Greek, and I'm not.
So we got a mutual connection with Sarah.
Yes.
She's been on the show a couple times, and
yes.
And you have a couple books published, and focusing on a lot is your most recent one that you came out with in 2018, which is called the Labyrinth.
Yes.
Warriors of Light.
Yes.
Volume 1.
Right.
That means there's a volume 2 coming out.
Yes, volume 2 is done in terms of ready for the betas. The betas are reading it. It's not quite ready to be published.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's there. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the title gonna be? Do you know yet, or is that still a secret?
Well, yeah. I'm calling it Keys to the Heart, but it might change.
Okay.
That's a big hint about what it might be about, though.
Okay.
There's a lot of keys. Not literally, though. Yeah.
So talk to us, and so people can kind of go to check out your website. You have a really good website that kind of has like all the information that they would need to learn more about your work as well, which is not just as your writer, you're also a yoga instructor. You're also a
correct.
Intuitive guide, energy healer. And all this information to learn more about you is right here on your website, which is really exciting. But looking at your books, so the warrior, the Labyrinth.
Yes.
It's what I love about it is that it's kind of a youth inspired book. Like it's for, what would you say the age range is? It's for,
I'd say 9 and up.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you have a really mature child, reading with the child that's a little younger, that's totally fine as well. There is deliberately no violence or anything inappropriate. Yeah.
So talk to us a bit about the book, and just kind of like what the back of the page synopsis of what people could expect.
Right. Right. So the story begins with the labyrinth, quite literally. It appears in the dreams of 6 13-year-olds.
Wow.
2 of them know each other. The other ones don't, but they meet actually in the dream world. Okay. So they meet up in the labyrinth, and they start to know each other as they start to understand what the labyrinth is.
Right.
And they learn that they're on a quest together. And the quest is to repair the energy lines in Earth and also save one of the characters' mother.
Oh, wow.
She's intimately connected to the Earth. So she's what you would call an HSP, which is a pretty common term these days, to the max. So she's so sensitive to the energies of the Earth that every time there's a crisis in Earth, she feels it. So in the beginning of the book, Apony, that's the character's name of the 13-year-old character. Her mother is actually in a treatment center because she's so depressed.
Okay.
And from there they travel the labyrinth, and the labyrinth eventually appears to them in real life. And they journey into it and go on all sorts of adventures without giving too much away. Yeah.
And so how would you what would be the it's so interesting to find different subcategories of fantasy.
Yeah.
What would this be categorized as you're kind of defining what the fantasy genre of this is?
Right.
What would be the subgenre of this?
And you know what, to be honest, I wouldn't even categorize it as fantasy.
Oh,
but
really?
Okay. But I think because that's such a mainstream genre, it's just natural to have to default to it. what it really is more of a visionary fiction. I don't know if you're familiar with visionary fiction, but that's more of an emerging field,
Okay.
and it's metaphysical. So that's, you know, really what the book's crux is about. It's about teaching kids to really be empowered and to understand who they are, you know, so they don't, if they are naturally different, naturally more open to things, if they're HSPs or if they're psychic, or if they just don't feel like they fit in.
Right.
So each of the 6 characters in the book are different, and they've experienced their own instances of feeling different with their peers, with you know, their backgrounds. So that's really what was motivating me with bringing those 6 characters together, and then of course just empowering them. So in the Labyrinth, there's it's a maze, and if you can see on the cover, I guess I could hold this up. Can you see that?
Other side.
Now
there
you
we
can.
go. There we go.
Oh my goodness, right? So it's not your typical labyrinth, right? So when you think about labyrinths, and I had people say this to me before, that's not a labyrinth. Yeah, but that's the labyrinth I'm using.
Right.
And there's a reason for it. It's a hexagram. And this symbol is so ancient. It's appeared probably before recorded history, well before recorded history. It's a magical symbol.
Right.
And so, you know, it brings the above to the below. It ties water and fire together, and it's magic and it's unifying. So that's why I use that. But it's also symbolic in terms of there's broken lines, and so those are the ley lines. And the darkness that you see in the earth is also inside of us, right? So we all have our darkness, we all have our light, and when the 6 teenagers go into the labyrinth, they have to heal their darkness, their shadow selves, enough to be empowered to actually carry out the mission that they're supposed to be on.
Right. Now, so how I would say, like, accessible is the story in the background to folks that might not have an education or a background or an understanding in some of the background of, like, the intuition and things like that.
Yeah, and so it really is written as a fantasy in that respect. I mean, I think that people who aren't necessarily immersed in the esoteric world are going to read it more as just a fantasy, and that's totally fine. It's meant to be, you know, fun and empowering in whatever way it's supposed to be. I mean, you don't have to know about any of the symbols I put in there. There's a little glossary in the end if you do want to look some of these things up. But it's meant to kind of inspire that thought process and that connection. So, for example, I have a little girl beta reader. She's 9 right now, and she's reading it with her mother. And she happens to connect with the character Lupe. And you just never know who you're going to connect with. So Lupe is a character who's really, he's basically the environmentalist of the group. He's really into, you know, making sure that he's environmentally conscious, and he's a loner. You know, he's the wolf, which is something I actually didn't mention either. They all shapeshift into their power animals.
That's right. There's like totem. Yeah. There's like totem animals involved. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So perhaps her totem animal is a wolf.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So.
And so where was the creation of it when you sat down? Because as you were writing it out, what was the inspiration behind writing the book in the first place? Right.
So that's an interesting question, because the book kind of came to me in piecemeal. And the first character, the first spark of inspiration that came to me was a butterfly. It was Apony. So Apony's totem animal is a monarch butterfly.
Okay.
And one day, you know, I don't know, 10 years ago, it was a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, I guess at this point, probably. But I think I was meditating, and she appeared, and I learned some of her story. And from there, the other characters appeared. And I think they all appeared first as their animal selves. And then I had to figure out their names, which was actually quite a process.
Right.
Because their names they basically mean their animal in some way.
Right.
So yeah. And then the other inspiration was basically, I think we all write the stories we need to have written, whether we're healing a wound inside of ourselves or someone that's really closely connected to us.
Right.
And I happen to have a son who's an HSP, and actually Lupe is modeled after him. And I grew up as an HSP. So I really felt like I needed to write a book for those kids who might be struggling.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is, to clarify for those with like HSP, that's a highly sensitive person, correct?
Yes, that's
okay.
that's the term that is used right now. And I personally think we're all highly sensitive to some degree, right? We're all empathic to some degree, which is also another term that's frequently used. But we shut it off. We shut it off early or late in life, and as a coping mechanism.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the idea for you to, because of the fact of like, was it ever not an option to make it like a youth book, or did you ever think about this is more of like an adult book, but were you always focused on writing it for that age range?
I was always focused on writing it for that age range, but with the intention that adults could enjoy it too. Right. So at this point, some of the people who have enjoyed it the most are actually adults. And that makes sense, because not all kids are going to enjoy it, because a lot of kids, when they pick up a fantasy book, they expect violence, they expect war, and I deliberately am leaving that all out. But if you're an HSP, you're not going to want necessarily the violence.
Right.
And so, yeah, it just depends on, what type of person is going to, relate to it.
So at what point, because, as we mentioned before we got on the air, I mean, you got your MFA in creative writing.
Correct.
And that's where you wrote your first book.
Yes.
Your first book, A Girl Named Truth, was based off. That was one of your when you were working on your master's thesis, correct?
Yes.
So, what point? How difficult or easy was it to you kind of wearing those two hats, your author's hat, your writer's hat, and then you're putting on your HSP, your intuitive hat, to say, all right, I want to say this is the direction I'm going, but I know, when I'm thinking about as a writer, I have to fit it within a specific structure. How easy or complicated was it for you to have to navigate some of those inside conversations?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think it's been a bit of a challenge in some ways, and I think that's one of the reasons why I decided to self-publish, because you are allowed to do what you want.
Yeah.
You don't have to alter the story. And yeah, it's a challenge to adhere to, I think, structure for a lot of us.
Right.
We want that freedom.
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, yeah, it's good. So there's is there, like, for instance, like for instance, when it comes to like story beats or, chapter, splitting into chapters, and then kind of making sure you're following the storyline of, multiple protagonists, like these aspects of things, that did you have to kind of fight through, maybe there, some meditative inspirations where you're kind of being pulled to bring the story in one direction, but you wanted to make it still fit within a specific structure?
Yeah, certainly. So for the Warriors of Light series, for the Labyrinth, it started out very piecemeal.
Right.
So I did have to pull because it is very much intuitively driven. Visions came to me in different ways. And so stories would come in pieces and I'd have to weave them together. So this one, the second book is more chronological, the way I wrote it. It just came to me that way, but this one wasn't. So it was a challenge. And I did have to say, oh, maybe that's a little too much down the, rabbit hole, let's just say, and kind of pull it back and make it a little more mainstream. And I might have to do that with the second one too. We'll see what the feedback is, because my tendency is sort of to kind of go into the esoteric world, the kind of magical world, that for me is fun,
And then did you have beta readers for your the first book as well?
I did. But they were, no, I did have a teenager. So yeah, I did have one that was younger. This time I do have a few more younger ones, which I think is good.
Was there any feedback that you had on there that was kind of challenging for you to hear, to things that you're kind of asked to recommend to change that you just really didn't want to?
Yeah, not really on the first one, which I'm kind of surprised. I did have one reader who thought it started too slow for her. Everyone's different, It took her too long to get into the labyrinth. But my young adult reader, she really liked it because she found herself in it. She was an HSP. It was funny. She compared it to Harry Potter, which I really don't feel like it's close, but for her, she made some kind of comparison to it. I don't know. But for this one, I think the next one, I will have to make a decision, do I go with what they, do they, because I think, some readers like Sarah mentioned, she's like, just wait until you get all the feedback, because, I have two adult men who have finished reading it. And one of them, I think, had a little trouble following all the storylines, because there are 6 main characters.
Right.
And they end up in the second book in different places, I'll just say. So it was a little hard for him, but she said, wait, just wait, because younger readers, they sometimes have an easier time following it. So we'll see. And
so the second book, so now that you have, as you said, you got your second book that's in beta phase. Is this a 2-book series? Or is it going to be 3-book, 4-book? Or are you thinking, like, is there like an end to this? Like, it's going to be a box set, or is this going to be an ongoing?
Well, the funny thing is I've always envisioned it as a trilogy.
Okay.
So 3 books. Right. But I've had different people say, oh, you're going to write some prequels to it. So I don't know. I'm open to different ideas. But honestly, I've also always had a vision from the start that it would be an interactive game, and also hopefully a film of some sort, like a series.
Right.
So I don't know. We'll see, right? Maybe there's a graphic novel in there too. I'm not going to illustrate it, but
Right. Yeah. So how is this like? So how in depth did you go in? Is this for our listeners and viewers of the show? Does this take place in our world, or is this kind of like world adjacent? Is there?
Great question.
Yeah.
So it actually takes place in New Hampshire.
Okay. All right.
It starts out in New Hampshire at a place called Mystic Lake, but it's in Wolfboro. So I actually used actual Wolfboro, but the lake is not real. I based it on a different lake that is near and dear to my heart. So it's actually based on a real location. I used Wolfboro because, Lupe, Wolf, it just had that interesting connection. And I think readers will be able to relate to it. So it starts out real modern time and a recognizable place. But it does, by the time you get into the second book, that changes a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was some of the inspirations of other books, those other series that you mentioned that you've heard feedback like, oh, this kind of reminds me of this, or as you're writing this, that you were kind of drawn towards some specific authors or books that you use as your inspiration?
Yeah. Honestly, the inspiration for me, because I'm a little older than, a lot of obviously much older than the target audience, but the books I read growing up, that really inspired me and kind of stuck with me were Madeline L'Engle's series. Right. And still to this day, all the books I've read, it still feels the most closely aligned to that series. And it's nice to see that series still in bookstores, you know.
Right.
You know, and they made it into a movie not too long ago.
Right.
But yeah, that series, you know, Dune a little bit, but that's too violent. Yeah, in terms of more modern books, I've been searching, to be honest, and I haven't really quite found a series that's too similar. I guess his Dark Materials is somewhat similar.
Philip Pullman.
Have you read his
Yeah.
work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was surprised to see how they were going to actually make some of those characters like visual. Like, how would you see it?
You know, I haven't seen the films.
I haven't. I
Okay.
like the film. I haven't seen the HBO series, but I'm
Okay.
really curious to see how they came up with the guys with the rolling things. I can't remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's right. So you bring up Madeline Engel. I'm curious about A Wrinkle in Time. Would that fit within this genre you're talking about? What did you call it? The visionary fiction? What was it?
Yes. So if you actually like search for visionary fiction, I think on like Goodreads, I think it comes up on Goodreads.
Right.
So I think when it was written, it was classified under sci-fi.
Right.
Because, you know, technically it sort of is. It's not really, well, a lot of it doesn't take place on Earth.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's kind of otherworldly. So, and I mean, I suppose mine has elements of sci-fi too. That's where the problem with genre is, right? Because, you know, it's so hard to put something in one genre when you're, you know, it's restraining, I guess.
Right. Well, it's just, I mean, I think what it is like us as humans, like we can only comprehend so many boxes before we have to, you know, it's, you know, 6 billion people in the world. We can't comprehend that number. So we have to you know,
but it's a challenge, you know, because like I told you earlier, that I'm considering mainstream publishing, and, you know, they want to know what genre and it's like, do I choose fantasy? Do I choose visionary fiction, magical realism? That could also be, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Like Toni Morrison is would consider magic.
That's true too.
Yeah.
Yep. That's true.
I love that visionary fiction. I'm gonna do some more digging on that. I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why they developed it, because it's, you know, the more esoteric, metaphysical type books that really aren't just fantasy. There's that element of deeper truth to it that the writer is really trying to put across.
Right. There's level of like, as you said, like this philosophy and spiritualism involved in it that kind of, as you say, that kind of harness and makes you ask questions about, as you said, those deeper truths.
Right.
So, yeah. And as you mentioned too, just to kind of like that, as you were saying before we went live, that, you know, truth seems to be that running theme and more that running theme through your books and your writing. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the meaning of my name. And when I learned that when I was a child, it was just kind of like a moment where it was like, okay, that's my beacon. That's my guiding light.
Right.
And I've always had a deep connection to my name. I think some people do and some people don't. And I think that my name was given to me for a reason, not necessarily that my parents knew that. And I've sort of made it my mission to make that an overarching theme of my life. Right. So the quest for inner truth, my business is Inner Truth Healing and Yoga. So, and then obviously my memoir is about finding my truth and voice. And then the middle grade series is about helping others find their voice.
Right. So how is the other aspects of you do as you mentioned, like as a yoga and yoga instructor and intuitive guide and energy healing, is how much of that has an impact on your your writing themes, for instance?
Yeah, I think they're all tied together. So in terms of, and I do get inspiration from every source. So, I mean, I might get a vision while I'm working on someone in Reiki, and that'll tie into the book, because I've had this vision of sort of an otherworldly, existence or, experience. And yeah, what I love about it is that, whatever modality I'm working in, there just is that kind of inherent guide of helping that person achieve a deeper truth.
I gotta ask you, do you ever in the process, I'm just thinking about like, other authors I've interviewed where you never know when inspiration is going to hit. Do you ever catch yourself like in the middle of like, maybe in like, in the middle of doing yoga where like something hits you? Do you like, cause I love doing yoga. I do yoga a lot too, but you're in a different space. And I always catch like, do you ever catch yourself like, oh, that's a great idea, but no, I can't. I'm in a different. Like, do you have to like write it down, or like when it happens, or?
Yeah, that doesn't happen so much anymore because I think I've trained myself, and actually the training came more through dreams because I have very vivid dreams and I have a lot of cool dream journeys. And I don't want to get up, how they say, keep a journal by your bed, and then you got to turn on your light and write in it. It's like, then you're awake, So I've trained myself to be like, okay, you're going to remember that dream and you're going to remember these elements, and so I think I've just subconsciously kind of trained myself to retain what I need to retain. Not that it always works, but yeah, there are those moments where you're like, driving or something and you're like, oh crap, that's a good line or something, it's like I can't write it down. Yep.
And so how much of the how much do you have already kind of scripted out, say, because you said you already got the second book done? What do you have for like do you already have outlines prepared for your original thought of a trilogy? Like, so
I don't use outlines. I'm one of those writers that just sits down at the keyboard and then that's when it comes. Yeah, that's literally, it's kind of like automatic writing in that sense, where you just have to trust that you're going to get the answers that you're seeking, which is really actually frustrating because I kind of wish I knew, like I knew sort of the bigger arch, I knew the bigger plot that I wanted to achieve. But like with the third book that I've started, I go back and forth. I'm like, should I get back to it or should I wait for the beta readers? Because it seems to want to take a turn that I'm not certain I love, but I have to trust, that it's, going to work out.
Right.
So yeah, I haven't outlined it out. It's just, I kind of got this idea that keeps nagging at me. Right. So I'm like, all right, if you insist, right? The writer's muse, I guess.
Right. So we have writers that listen, other authors that listen, or people that are looking at doing that. And they might, like you might have a full-time job someplace else, and doing some other things.
Yes.
What would be some of your advice to say, like, to how to find time to sit down and write a book? Because as we said, this first book, it's with the glossary itself, it's over 300 pages. So that's a pretty good sized book.
Right.
Where do you find how do you schedule your time to make time?
Yeah. And I think that's a great question. I really think that any writer should allow themselves to see what works for them, because I've read so many things and I've listened to so many writers that, say you need to schedule an hour a day and pick your time, whether it's morning, lunch break, or night, and just write and dedicate yourself. Some people just, hole up into, I don't know if you know Matthew Quick, but he's a Goddard graduate. And I remember he gave a talk while I was there, and he said, what he did, he was living in his in-laws' house. His wife was working, and he just hold himself up in the basement and just wrote nonstop. Wow. Not everyone can do that, right? So, for me, if you're working on a deadline, maybe you have to do that. For me, I gave up the idea of wanting to write, a billion books at a certain amount of time. I just thought, well, that's not necessary, so I decided to kind of maybe take the easier route in terms of when the inspiration hits me, I sit down and write. Sometimes I do force it though. Right. Obviously if you're waiting too long, write something. So like, for example, I do want to wait to see what a couple more of my beta readers say before I delve too much into book 3. So I've decided to, and Sarah was actually nudged me this too. She said, just work on something else, work on your poetry. So I've been writing poetry, so work on something else that's creative, that's writing, if you have to. But yeah, be consistent, I guess, at least, whether it's,
And what were some of the and that was some advice that you just mentioned, but what was something that you got from, say, like your MFA courses that was like invaluable for you while you were working on the Labyrinth?
Yeah, I mean, so let's see. I'm trying to think of how I related the MFA experience to, well, yeah. So so Goddard, as you probably know, is a very unique place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, honestly, the most value I got out of Goddard was the esoteric kind of metaphysical experience. I mean, certainly there was valuable writing, craft information. But that probably helped me more than anything else. It really gave me permission to step into my authentic self. I think I was hiding from it for so long. So, it gave me permission to write. I'd been holding it back. And of course, my experiences there gave me permission to actually delve into the metaphysical world. So honestly, in terms of the craft of writing or that sort of kind of nuance of putting a book together and timing it and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, nothing's really stuck with me in terms of,
So it's kind of like, as you said, it kind of gives you permission to, and Goddard was great at that. It's like giving you to write what you know. It's
Well, my first advisor was Kenny Freeze, and he is a memoirist, and I started writing A Girl Named Truth as fiction, and he was like, "What are you doing? Why are you writing that as fiction?" So I guess in retrospect, that probably answers your question a bit too. It's that steered me completely in a different direction. It allowed me to actually write the truth boldly, and that's why it's nonfiction.
And so, because you mentioned you write poetry, you wrote this the visionary fiction novel, you wrote a memoir. How different is, as a writer, not the actual rhythm of the story of how you write it, but how different is what you pull from, I guess, creatively for each one of those?
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, I guess it was a completely different process, the two books. The first book, it was, I guess I sort of had more of, the structure, because you have it already, you've already lived that life. So you can't make anything up. You can't ask for, some higher inspiration or something. You've already lived your life. So the challenge for that was, how do I pick out the theme? How do I pick out the story that I'm trying to tell, which, was finding truth. So I remember one day I was walking the dogs, and I had, thankfully, like you were mentioning before, what happens when your inspiration hits you? I had happened to think to bring some index cards and a pen. And thank God, because I think I reached the top of the hill and I was like, oh my God, that's it. And I pulled them out and started writing down every single, it just kind of came to me one after another, little snippets of my life that I needed to put in there, that all kind of came together. But it was up until then, it was kind of like, I don't know, I'm just writing. I don't know what I'm saying, just, and then it all just kind of came together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the actual, putting together, and I think as you mentioned that you're looking at trying to get a publisher for your second book.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how you kind of navigated through the world of self-publishing.
Yeah, when I published A Girl Named Truth, gosh, that was what, 2017, I think it was. That was, I feel like the self-publishing world was still pretty new. I remember looking around saying, oh my gosh, how do you do this? You know, what are the options? That's when a lot of the, there were a lot of people who were trying to get you to, you know, buy into the kind of, you know, approach where you can get help to do it. And that's still out there. But I think, they make it pretty easy. You know, Create Space is turned into KDP, I think it's what it's called now. And it's not too bad. You know, it's very approachable. For me, I think what I've learned is that I think you can there's a lot of benefits. You can, like I mentioned before, you can design the book the way you want. You can pick your cover, your title. You have complete control over it. The genre you want to put it under, how long the book is, you know, what font you use. You know, I mean, for the Labyrinth, I had fun with it because I hired an illustrator to do little pictures of the characters and how they kind of appeared in my head and a little map. And when I think about transitioning into a traditional publisher, there's a part of me that's like, well, you know, I need the right one because I don't want to change everything.
Right.
You know, but yeah, there's advantages and disadvantages to both. And I think at this point, I just realized that I do want to see the book morph into other things. Like I mentioned, I do want to see it morph into a game. I do want it to be approachable in different ways to people, because some people don't love books. Some people like to listen to them. Some people like to do videos, and some people like to watch series or movies. So I've always had that vision for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned, like the cover of that, did you have your illustrator? Did you have to hire an illustrator to design that?
I did. I did. Yeah. So, I mean, you can go on KDP and pick kind of generic covers, but I don't know if you've noticed with self-published books, those are pretty obvious. Right. You know, when you know someone's just kind of picked the generic cover and then like thrown a couple of things at it. So I didn't want that, and I hired a really great illustrator, and she did every graphic in here, including the cover, and she was great. I mean, I just gave her the vision and she made it appear. So
how did you find the illustrator?
You know, a lot of things just kind of, you know, fall into place. It's kind of interesting how it happens. So I found her, I think, through the blogging world. Okay. So I blog pretty regularly. I've been blogging for more than a decade, I think, at this point. So, she, I think someone else was using her perhaps, and I came across her illustrations, and they just kind of spoke to me. Okay. And I reached out, and that's how I found her. Yeah.
You do blog. You just blogged this. You had a blog out today.
Oh yeah, I wrote one today. Yes.
Look at that. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you do have a pretty, you have a lot of people that follow you on your blog too.
Yeah, I think I typically get now around 50 comments or views. Not more than that views, but people who will like it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was about a dream visit. Nice. Talking about dreams and
that's good.
Otherworldly things.
And you kind of talk about it, because I know that I saw some of your YouTube videos where you're doing some intuitive writing, and I think that was like there's some YouTube videos of you talking about that. So
there may be floating around there. I know I've done some in the past. I'm trying to think if I have anything actually up on my YouTube channel right now. I don't think so, but I could.
You do. You have. I watched it. I watched it, Alethea.
Oh no!
It was your. No. No, it wasn't that. It was your book trailer.
Book trailer. Right? Yes, I have that up. And you know who made that? That was like a 9-year-old kid. I deliberately wanted to hire someone who was and it was But he did a good job, I think. It was. Yeah. So sorry. So what was your question about? Now I forget.
Oh, it was.
Oh no.
Like you said, like how, like, so. I guess my other question, because of your ability of being being so intuitive, is do you see yourself being like bombarded with other ideas of other book ideas or other stories that you feel that you're feeling to being asked to tell as well? And what would you do to try to help maintain that?
Honestly, I wish I did, because I
Yeah.
know there are writers who are like, feel like they've always got like a backlog.
Right.
I kind of feel like I'm like, you need to write this story first. You need to see this one to completion, no matter if you want to or not, And so I have gotten a few other ideas, and I've kind of started a couple of other books, but I sort of keep getting drawn back to, okay, finish the series first.
Right.
But what I do is I just kind of, I open up a little file and just write down what has come to me. And if it's meant to be, it'll be there later. I mean, there's a couple books I've just never even published, the children's books, picture books, but maybe I will someday. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know somebody who makes children's books. So
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah. She does a great job with it too.
She puts
Yeah.
out like two books a month. Like,
It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
She churns them out. Yeah.
I know. It's like, slow down, Sarah. You're embarrassing everybody else here.
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So another piece of advice I'm curious about, because we do see, like, on your Amazon page, you are connected with a few anthologies. There's some ones that you've co-written, you've written. And would that be a piece of advice you would give to authors who want to try to get their name out, is to
absolutely
seek out anthologies?
So yeah, what I did before I started writing my own books is it's been a while since I've actively done it, but yeah, I dedicated quite a lot of time to writing poems or essays or whatever kind of sparked my interest when I'd see it. So, following different online now, different writers networks, I guess, and finding anthologies. And if you do like to write poetry or essays or short fiction, that's a great way to start. I mean, honestly, since I went towards self-publishing, I can't say that it's really helped me yet, but it may, especially if I land a big one, which I haven't really tried, too much to. But certainly if you can get a big name out there, that's going to help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And do you, what do you do when, as you mentioned before, that when the inspiration hits, you're there and you start writing it out?
Yeah.
Do you ever try to, like, as you say, like, do, like, warm up, as artists will try to do, like, warm up sketches? Do you do any, like, warm up reading or writing to kind of get things flowing again?
That's a good question. I mean, there's so many techniques you could do. Yoga would definitely get that creative inspiration flowing. Going outside for me really helps.
Yeah.
I get inspiration just from walks. It's kind of like a walking meditation. So I think that's a great way of. But for me too, honestly, as I said before, it really is just sitting in front of the computer and like typing and just trusting that the words will come out. As frustrating as that can be.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would be some other pieces of advice that you would give to folks that are afraid to actually take that manuscript and upload it to KDB Publishing or something along those lines? What would be some advice or inspiration you'd give them?
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly, it's for me, it was the technical aspect. It was challenging. I mean, anything that could go wrong probably did. I mean, that's just how I seem to learn, by trial and error. But it's not that bad. And honestly, I'm sure it's gotten easier too. There's a lot of templates out there. There's a lot of help out there. And I think probably one of the best advice I can do too is don't buy into all the offers for help. I mean, when you research self-publishing, there's going to be so many people who are trying to make money from your quest. And you don't make a lot of money out of books, right? I mean, so for me, it was like, how can I do this in a way that I'm at least going to break even, and then I didn't want to go into debt. So, for A Girl Named Truth, this photo is an existing photo. I had my cousin, who's a graphic designer, create the cover. So it wasn't too expensive. I didn't have a budget, and I did everything else myself. I had, I was lucky that I had a pretty good draft at Goddard, but I certainly had to get editors, and those were friends, actually, editor friends. It's not perfect. I'm sure there are still errors in it, but traditionally public books have them as well. So for this one, I had a little more budget, so I hired. Yeah, but you can find graphic designers out there that aren't a fortune, and they're good. She did a great job. And like I said, there's template. I mean, even actually, I created this template in I think just Pages on my computer. It's not. It's easier now. Probably if you use Google, it's much easier. Google Docs, And there's editing software out there. So Google Docs is pretty good, actually. It catches a lot of things. So where you put your money, I would say put your money in getting an editor, at least to catch the grammar and as many typos as they can get, Get some beta readers because they're free. Yeah. They're really nice people, Make sure they're interested in your genre, that's important. And then, otherwise, there's mixed, you can buy the ISBNs. I did. You don't have to. The reason to buy them is that you can, print it other places, not just Amazon. And I have, for example, with the Warriors of Light series, I have a woman who sells it through her business. Her name is Ava Goulet. She's wonderful, which actually just going to mention her here because some of the readers might find connection with her. She runs Dancing Jaguars spirit camps. And actually, that's my readership, kids who are more interested in learning about themselves and the world and that connection. So she sells my books through her business. So she couldn't necessarily do that with Amazon. I had to put those on a different platform.
Right.
Yeah. But that does cost, I think an ISBN is about $100. So, it's an expense as well.
Right. But like you say, you own the book. Like, I mean, it's not like you don't own the book, but you have more freedom over it. Yeah.
Right. No, you do have ownership to it. Yeah. Either way. But but more freedom with how you print it and what you want to do with it in the future too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Alethea, we're at our hour mark already. So.
Wow.
See, it's quick, huh?
I know, right?
So if people want to learn more about your writing and learn more about your work, they can go to Alethea Kehas.
Yep, AletheaKehas.com.
Yep. AletheaKehas.com.
Yeah.
AletheaKehas.com.
Yeah, AletheaKehas. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I spelled it right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just .com. So my full name connected.com.
Right.
Yeah. And that brings you right to my website. My blog is right off there as well.
Right.
And that's The Light Behind the Story.
Right. Excellent. So thank you very much. It's been a great time. And so we were talking about your second book so much. You have to come back on.
Yes.
And then and chat about book 2 of
that would be awesome.
The Labyrinth. So
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, Alethea. I had a great time chatting with you. I look forward to talking to you some more.
Awesome. Thank you.
Alethea with her you got your snowflake sweater on too. See,
I know, right?
Yeah.
All cozy.
And you know what? Honestly, this is one of my favorite, and I think I proactively say this is like some of my favorite times of the year because like the days are getting a little bit longer, like by a few minutes every day. So there's like, that horizon. Yeah.
And it smells like spring already.
Right.
I noticed that. Like you can smell it, so that's good.
Well, technically, where we live in our neck of the woods,
Yeah.
New Hampshire, Vermont, it smells like mud season.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
but I'm trying to be
Yeah.
positive. Oh goodness.
All right. All right. All right. All right. Here we go, Alethea.